So this session is about what makes a good hyper-casual game. So it's very suited to anyone who's thinking about getting into hyper-casual games, or maybe if you've created a hyper-casual game and you want to make it better. How many of you here have heard of Kwalee? That's good. You're in the right place. Hold it 1 second, the clicker's not working. So they're just sorting it out at the back.
It'll all be fine. Yeah. So hopefully the slides will be coming shortly. In the meantime, let's have a think how we can get started. It's difficult to know when you've got these things, whether we kick off and have a conversation or if we wait a few seconds for the slides to go up. So Simon, you've been involved in making games for a very long time, and what would you say is I don't want to try and cover the material you're going to later.
Yep.
What would you say is the sort of thing that really kind of fundamentally feels different about what we're doing with the hyper-casual type content than maybe some of the more casual stuff that you were doing before? I think basically back to the Happy Nation days when you're doing more wide. Oh, there we go. We might be there. We might be there. We might not be there.
Yeah, so I'm a veteran developer, and in the past I've run my own development companies, and I've been in the industry for 30 plus years. How I've seen it change, and especially with respect to hyper-casual, is it's about honing one key mechanic, one key part of the gameplay, and it's almost like at the pinnacle of creativity, I'd say, because you're trying to make that, there's nowhere to hide. You're trying to make that one key bit of gameplay feel amazing, so amazing that you want to keep playing past the next ad.
It's that classic design line, which is, I forgot who, it's some Frenchman, I've forgotten the name of the person. You know, design is not done when there's nothing left to add. Design is done when there's nothing left to take away. And I think hyper-casual is really at the epitome of that. So, not sure why we're still having troubles, because I'm sure I saw it earlier.
Yeah.
But apparently they're going to continue looking. It's only because we've had no problems this morning. It's all been smooth.
I'm just going to get a paper copy of my slides just in case I need to talk.
Exactly, we talk through it. So I think that principle John was hinting at there, this idea that simplicity is utterly key, I think is important. When I'm looking at this, like I said, the template I kind of worked on, I'm looking at trying to find out what's the one movement on the screen you do. If you're assuming a phone-like experience, you don't have to assume that, but if you were assuming a phone-like experience, what's the one interaction? And why is that one interaction fun? And then getting down to that sort of basic level of really deep, heart of the problem kind of way of looking at things. And really just getting rid of the rest of the bullshit. And in fact, in that way, I think that's where the idea of gameplay like this, I think, is so powerful. I'm trying to work out his slide, so I'll keep talking. But I have this terrible habit of when there's problems, I just do the talk, and it's very bad of me. But
Thanks,
fidget spinners is a great way of looking at it. If you think about a fidget spinner, that simplicity of mindset, the need to captivate someone's attention for that moment, it's very different than creating a Skyrim. Although I find myself doing, I don't know about you, Tom, but I find myself doing, hyper-casual-like moments in bigger games. Like Skyrim, I spent so much time just picking flowers. Why? Why did I pick flowers in Skyrim? I spent hours and hours doing it. Anyway, sorry, Simon, I'm going.
While they're coping with the technical problems, I'll talk through my first initial slides to see what happens. into... no.
The technician
Okay.
test, so it's going to try to search it out for you. Sorry about that.
So, Kwalee sort of fly under the radar a bit, but in Q4 2019, we were number 5 by downloads games publisher in the US App Store. We also, in 2019, had 12 number 1 hits, averaging 1 a month. Now, when you start thinking about Hypercasual, you might think, does it have lots of ads and get its revenue from ad revenue? Does it have a short lifespan where players are playing for days rather than weeks? Does it can it be developed quickly in terms of weeks rather than months? But none of these things really define a hyper-casual game. So what we're going to do in the presentation when they get it working is work through 3 key principles, okay? And we're going to iterate through that and show you examples and what we've done in terms of our games in honing those principles. As they're not fixing the technical problems. The first principle is to do with mass appeal. This is probably the one that you're most familiar with, and you can measure that with CPI. Everyone here knows what CPI is, yes?
Cost per install.
Yep. It's cost per install. And you need to have very good ads and creative in order to get a low cost per install. And to do that, you need satisfying visuals and satisfying moments. And a player really needs to get what the game is all about within the first 3 seconds. The second principle is bite-sized gameplay. Okay? And we measure that with number of sessions, and that's all about the mechanics. It needs to be satisfying and simple mechanics. And the third principle is short-term stickiness. And we measure that with strong retention. And that comes from having a satisfying loop and a progression that keeps the player playing through the first, second, third, fourth day. So, we're going to get to the point where I can't actually talk through without the slides in a sec. When you... Yeah, sorry.
So, while you get it done, the stickiness. Can you explain how do you actually measure the stickiness? How do you calculate the stickiness through retention? Because that's kind of a vague term.
Yep. So we look at day 1 retention, and we have a threshold where it needs to be above 40%. And if it does, then we look at signing that game, along with other metrics. The CPI, we're looking at 50 cents in the US.
So if the stickiness had some kind of number, what would the number be? Because we can measure retention, D1, D3, D7. We know in percentage that means. But how do you actually take stickiness? Is that measurable, or is it just...
We measure it with retention. So the key metric would be our day 1 retention when we initially look at prototypes and concepts. And that's why it doesn't need a huge amount of levels, because we're only looking at the first couple of days when we do our initial testing.
So you're talking about that stickiness in there, so you do a small amount of levels, for example?
Yeah, we do a prototype that we test on the store.
Right, and then just add stuff onto it and then see how the stickiness works.
Yes. Yeah, and I will go into details about how you get that stickiness, which I think is what you're driving at. So, if I go through each principle one by one and say what we do?
If you don't manage to get the slides working, can I give you a card so you can send us a slide?
Yeah, everyone in this room, I'll try, I think if you give me your card afterwards, I'll look at sharing the slides with you, okay? So with CPI and improving your mass appeal, the first thing is to have inoffensive visuals. Okay, so there what I mean by inoffensive, it needs to be a wide theme, it needs to be genderless, cultureless, but not to the extent where everything's a cube, but it does need to transfer to whatever territory and global country that you're looking to put this in. The second thing after inoffensive visuals is you need a satisfying moment. And the example I was going to show on the slides was our own drop and smash game, which is all about smashing objects with other objects, where you drop an object from a high platform. And obviously that smashing of the objects is an instant satisfying moment that you can show in an ad, and people get it in the first 3 seconds. Okay, yeah. Cool. Yeah, let me just move that. Move that so it doesn't spill. Take that off. Okay, present that. Take this out. Okay, yeah. Oh, what happened then? Yeah. Hopefully, we've got some
Fingers
slides.
crossed.
That. Okay, we stepped through the 3 principles, which is reiterated here. We said about mass appeal, low CPI, inoffensive visuals. We said about the threshold that we use is 50 cents. Number of sessions, we look for more than 2 a day. Strong day rate on retention, we talked about the 40%. And this is about questioning your idea. And I was using 2 Kwalee games as an example here. So whenever you have a new concept or a new prototype, look at measuring against these 3 principles. So this one is Trace Ace, which is a prototype that we developed. If you go back there, you can see you're tracing over a drawing, and each level was a different drawing. So, does it have a strong appeal when advertised? Well, everyone likes to draw, as proven by our Draw It game, which is one of our biggest downloads. Does this game cater to bite-sized sessions? It does, because each level is fairly small, because each one's a small drawing, but the user can take as long as they want, and it doesn't actually, apart from following the lines, it doesn't actually progress that much, so there isn't that moment-to-moment gameplay addictive and satisfying that we're looking for. Whereas Drop and Smash, for instance, has a strong visual appeal, as we said, about smashing stuff on the screen, and that's easily captured on video. It has bite-sized session. Every time you drop an object onto another object, that's a new level. And then the moment-to-moment gameplay And progression and satisfaction comes from having different objects, the ability to have finishing moves where your ragdoll character can jump off the platform as well. And then we also allow you to upgrade the power and height and things like that. But that's not, apart from the principles, there are also other tests you can put your idea through. First thing is your game playable in portrait mode. Most people want to play in one hand like this, and you can't really do that with a landscape mode game. Can it be played with a single hand? With drawing games, surprisingly, it's very hard to draw with just a thumb, so it doesn't quite pass that test. Is there a true sense of progression? Unless you get other drawing techniques in there, the only sense of progression is to see a new picture in this particular case. Drop and smash, definitely portrait. Can be played with a single hand because the controls is about tapping the screen with your thumb. And is there a chance of progression? Yes, because you continually gain more power, more objects to smash, and the height of the platform. We talked about inoffensive visuals, and I've used Shootout 3D as an example there. This is one of our biggest hits of last year. You can see we haven't distilled the idea and the visuals down to cubes, but we have removed most of the things that we would say makes the theme too narrow. And it's not really a shooting game. For people who have played it, it's a puzzle game. And then the satisfying moment, again, I'm using drop and smash as an example. Next one is for sessions. If you want to increase the number of sessions, you need a very easy to simple mechanic. And you can read the sort of phrases I often hear from about hyper-casual games. But with a simple, satisfying mechanic, what you need is something like this. So, for instance, the one on the left, the mechanic is you tap and it jumps across a preset arc, okay? Quickly, that gets old and boring. It's very binary, you can master it. It is simple, but it's not satisfying. The one on the right is where you tap and hold, and then you adjust the arc, and then you release and you jump. Now that has a lot of nuances, but it's still simple, but it gives you a lot more in terms of satisfaction. And again, we're going to use plank as an example of that, where you tap, hold, the plank lengthens, and then you release, and it drops the plank onto the next pillar. And then finally, progression improves retention. Because players want to play more of a game they enjoy, the need to have a little bit more, know that the game is going to expand a tiny bit more. And I'm using jetpack jump here as an example, because you can get further and further, and gradually you get to travel to new locations around the world, and it's that progression to see a new location which drives you on. And then the other way to drive retention that we're going to use here is the illusion of depth. And Cleanup 3D is a bit like an I/O game. We can instantly change direction. The controller chases you. What I mean by that is wherever you put your thumb, that's where the controller is, so it's very mobile, specific design. You increase in size, and as you increase in size within a level, you can consume more and more of the objects. Enough so that eventually you get to the point where you can suck the walls down and you go outside, and then your vacuum cleaner can suck up cars and buildings and things like that. And then there's no bad decisions. The player can go in any direction they want. It gives that illusion of a lot more depth, even though the levels are fairly confined. So just to end this, we're going to give some examples based on each principle using Kwalee's games. So the first one is plank. In order to get good CPI, you've got bold colours with simple gradients and blocky characters and animals. You have looper, and then you've got draw it. I'm not going to read all the slides out, but you can read them there. All of these games have done over 20 million downloads, so they work. Same with improving the number of sessions. It needs to be a satisfying and simple mechanic. We've gone into a plank already. Looper, it's all about, you tap to add the beats, but it's not just about beats, it's also a puzzle game because you don't want to collide with the other beats that are going around on the track. And then with Draw It, it's a bit like Pictionary, if you know the board game. You compete against other people to create a recognisable drawing before anyone else. So you don't have to be the best at drawing, but you do need to be the best at producing something recognisable. And finally, improving retention, you need a satisfying loop and the progression. With Plank, you get all these animals that follow you around. It looks quite cute with all these square animals following you after you. With Looper, you get more and more levels with different music, and there's hundreds of levels. And with Draw It, you actually open up new words and therefore new challenges to have with the other players. So then, just to reiterate, it's just those three again. Any questions? I sort of whizzed through that because I knew I was running out of time.
You did really well. I was expecting to if you go on longer. I'm going to sneak a couple of questions because I think after all that effort, I mean, frankly, I think he deserves a round of applause for just continuing. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. And also hugely useful and information packed. So one quick question, if anyone wants to take it. Yeah. Go for it.
What's the communication channel? Sorry, I'm Mike.
Hi, Mike.
I'm obsessed with Hypercasual, so I've got a lot of questions. But what's the channel that you communicate with developers? What do you use? How often do you communicate, and how do you keep? It's a vibrant industry, Hypercasual. So how do you make it so even the communication is vibrant? So it's not, we communicate once a week or.
So we have a talented UA team, and so we grew out of being a developer, marketing and doing user acquisitions for our own games. So we have a very talented marketing UA team that we now use for our expanding publishing business. And they've learned so much from doing our own games. It is all about creating that eye-catching and amazing creative ad that gets across the game. Is that answering your question?
Were you kind of more talking about the developers as opposed to the players? Yeah. No? Oh, okay. I'll let you.
So in this sense, you're a publisher, I'll be developer. So what would be the communication channel if we say, hey, I've got a game, do you want to test it out?
Okay, so most of our submissions come from our website. As soon as you go on there on the homepage, there's a submit your game button, hit that. It takes a few basic details, including a link to a prototype or demo. One of my team guarantees to look at it, and we will do feedback on it. We do within 3 working days, okay? And so you'll hear back from us within 3 days, and we'll let you know whether we want to proceed. And the first stage is for us to do a UA test on the game.
Cool. And on that note, Simon, thank you very much.